first of all, that I'm not my sin.
Right.
And this is not who I am. This is something I struggle with. And then on top of that, to be able to actually label it and say, okay, I am addicted to pornography and this is a sin struggle and I am stuck in this. And I think that's a big place for a lot of women to, first of all, have to disconnect it from their identity is really hard.
Yeah.
I think for anyone in recovery it is. But then to be able to actually say, I really do have a problem and I really need help.
Welcome to the 423 podcast with 423 Communities, where we explore the intersection of faith, recovery, and restoration, equipping you to move from shame and addiction towards life in Christ. Hey, Jara. How's it going today?
Hey, Ben. I'm good. How are you?
I'm also good.
Good.
It's funny talking to someone with another J name. That's not Joel.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
It's the better version, though. Sorry,
Yeah.
Jill.
Joel's with us right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might be able to overhear him. We decided to kick him off the podcast.
That's
for
right.
today.
Sorry.
But Jara, thank you so much for hopping on.
Yeah.
I would love to just give you some space to talk to our 423 audience, let them know who you are if they haven't heard
Right.
from you, and why we're talking to you today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Well, my name is Jara. I lead the women's program for 423. I have been on with us since about January of this year, so maybe nearing a year in the next couple months, which is exciting. I actually live in Oklahoma, so I'm visiting Texas today to be with the team. But yeah, that is kind of my role. How I kind of got into this was through my own personal recovery journey of years of pornography addiction and struggling in isolation and the darkness. And it was through the Lord working through me in recovery and going through my own freedom journey that I felt led into leading and feeling led into ministry. And so it was through my own journey of that and the Lord guiding me and pushing me out of my comfort zone and working in me to end up here with 423.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's what I love about our team is we all come from a place of leading out of our own brokenness and our own weakness and God turning it for good and making it into a strength. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. And so speaking of kind of your story, today we're going to talk about the woman's perspective behind sexual brokenness, pornography use, kind of the usual topics we go through.
Right.
In our podcast so far, it's mainly been from the male perspective,
Mm-hmm.
Joel and I. I think we've done our best to try to keep it pretty neutral,
Right.
Including the woman's experience or the betrayed partner's experience. Shout out Rachel for coming on a few episodes ago. If you haven't listened to that, it's a great episode. If you have a betrayed partner in your life, to send that over and provide reference for them. But today we just wanted to take a step back and have you on the podcast, share your own experience, your own story, and then also talk about from a general perspective what it's like for women on this journey of finding hope and healing and restoration from problematic sexual behavior. And so with that, Jara, I would love to hear kind of what it was like growing up in the church, growing up as a Christian and dealing with these issues of growing up in a sexualized world, right? You're 24 years old. You are 23?
24. You got it right the first time.
Nice.
Good job.
So like myself, I'm also 24. We grew up in the thick of it. We grew up in a digital world. And so we'd just love to hear what it was like growing up for you.
Of course. Thank you. Yeah. So I was raised in the church my whole life. I grew up in a much stricter denomination that was really rules emphasized, very man-made rules, very much appearance led. And so with that came, purity culture and that side of things. And so even before I was exposed to pornography, I would hear, some things about sex in the church, more of a scariness or a hesitance. And then women I would hear who were married emphasize sex as more of a thing that was just for the husbands and something not to look forward to and something that they didn't enjoy, which kind of painted it as a little girl as something that sounded scary and something not to look forward to in marriage. And so, growing up, whenever I was exposed to pornography, I started, I was in youth camps growing up, going to the summer camps together as a church, and there was only a handful of times I ever heard pornography mentioned. But when it was, I heard something similar to, boys, if you're struggling with pornography, you need to find freedom from that. And hearing that, sitting in the audience as like a 12-year-old girl, 13-year-old struggling with pornography, that really painted it in like two ways for me. I realized like, well, the church, first of all, views this as only a boys' issue.
Yeah.
And they didn't acknowledge anything for the girls. Because the girls' side of it was that purity culture of like, girls, make sure you know what you're dressed, like how you're dressing and what you're wearing, because you're going to cause the boys to stumble.
Right.
So already you're viewing yourself kind of as, I don't know if the word is an object in that sense, but more like I'm here to adhere to what the men need. I'm here to make sure they don't stumble. And also, honestly, painting the men in a light of they have no self-control. Like men are not almost intelligent enough to be able to grow in those ways.
Yeah.
And almost like an animalistic type view of men. Sometimes I think that's portrayed that I think people don't talk about enough. And so I got painted in that way, kind of like, okay, well, girls are just like here to be there for the guys, and we need to make sure we're not buying into making them stumble.
Right.
And then the other side of it was realizing, well, they're not even giving the guys any type of guidance on this. They're just saying, don't do it. And so if they know it's a struggle, they're saying it's a men's struggle, and then they're not even giving them help, they're not going to give me any help either.
Yeah.
And so that was really my perspective of the church growing up in that. And that led to a lot of shame growing up, because it made me feel like, well, I must be the only girl in the world, apparently, who struggles with this. And if we already see it as very dirty and messed up and wrong, but the boys almost get a pass of like, well, they're boys, they're sexual, they can't control themselves.
Teenage boys.
They're going through changes. And they acted like it was wrong, but it was almost like,
Get a pass.
that's understandable, but not for the girls. And so really wasn't painted women in like as sexual beings or giving us any guides on like, you're sexual too, and God also created you this way. And like, how do you walk through that? That was just totally neglected on that side for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, that is such a insightful portrait that you offer of what it's like growing up in the church.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, of women being painted as like almost just conduits of men's sexuality. Like you aren't your own sexual being, but you just are there to either protect men's sexuality growing up outside of marriage, or to be the outlet for it for whenever they do get into marriage. And it won't be fun for you, or you better be afraid, or all these different messages. Yeah. And that's what my wife, who grew up in church all her life too, that was the messaging that she received as well, of you may not even like your husband, or you have to wait
do it.
quite a few years for this to become fun for you. And it's like, oh wow, that may not be true for everybody.
Becomes a very damaging view.
No, so isolating and so demeaning. And it's hard to be a human. It's hard to be especially someone that's a Jesus follower,
right?
And to we're not here to blame or to defer responsibility, but to understand the context,
right? And what was the environments that led it to be harder to get help, or harder to feel supported or understood, and for the churches not to be equipped, to have those conversations in that way.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So even within that description, I feel like we kind of talked about, men's draw to pornography or broken forms of sexuality. Right. Being triggered by the visual aspects, or how men have, quote unquote, a higher sex drive in general. And so, there's that assumption that gets put on of like, men use pornography. And obviously, looking at the statistics, sure, they use it more, but, women more and more commonly are also using pornography.
Right.
And it's affecting them. And so I would love to hear if there's like maybe some general distinctions, or you could just talk about from the women's perspective at large of like, what draws women to use pornography or to just broken forms of sexuality? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think from the women I've talked to, I think a lot of times it can start first from almost a curiosity standpoint.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times if women are like grown up in the church, or maybe some who aren't, but just have more conservative type household where they make you afraid of your body, even in terms of like girls going through changes as they get older, and, menstruation coming through or whatever it might be, they almost have like a fear of our bodies or, not allowing any types of questions about that stuff. And so when you're kind of being raised in that way, if you are exposed to pornography in some way or the other, whether that's through someone showing you something, you stumble across it online.
Yeah.
Because I think from, statistics, we learn that most people aren't just going out to try to find pornography as a child.
Yeah.
Somehow we find it one way or the other.
If you're a child, if you're under 18 and you have access to pornography, even if you sought it out, I would still consider that exposure.
Right.
As a minor, you shouldn't have access to
it.
pornography in the first place.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of times when they're shown that, there's like this light bulb of like, oh, I'm curious. Like, what is this? Like, I've maybe never seen, a full-grown naked person in general, right? As you probably shouldn't at that age.
Yeah.
So it's more of a curiosity of like, well, I don't know anything about my body. I don't know anything about boys' bodies. It's a more like, that's how it started for me, was curiosity of like, what is this? I haven't had any answers to my questions about my body or growing up. And so this then becomes your outlet of researching and figuring out these answers. And so then the other side of it is when we get to the deeper things of like finding the why and figuring out why are we stuck in these, I think for women a lot of times is an intimacy issue where we're lacking true intimacy growing up from God, first of all. That's not really being modeled for us a lot of times in our families or maybe in church, depending on how people were raised. And then from our parents and true friendships even growing up. I think even as children, growing up, if we had that model to us of true community as kids and like having those safe relationships, that would also be that form of like having that safe intimacy.
Right.
And so women start to learn, I think, from pornography, which sometimes leads them into these cycles of sleeping around or whatever it might be. We realize that, I think a lot of women are not just seeking sex or just love sex or just seeking out that lustful factor all the time. I think what it is I've heard women say, well, my only way to be held or to feel that love was through sex or, pornography.
Right.
And really what that means is, well, you're lacking in intimacy. You're lacking feeling safe or known or having that connection of love.
Right.
And pornography becomes that gateway and then those other sexual behaviors that can come with it that escalate over time.
Yeah. No, that's really insightful. I think, part of the reason we see these statistics growing for women using pornography is kind of the way culture has shifted. Like, I think you think about male relationships and we usually bond over external things, sports, your career, external factors. For women, you like generally y'all are more easily express your emotions, the things that you have in the internal experience. And so usually women, I think, kind of have that intimacy modeled better or maybe more available. But now as our culture has shifted and we live in a technological world, a post-pandemic world, we have all become much more isolated. And so I think women now, as well as men, are just facing more and more isolation. And whenever you have if you don't have close, intimate relationships where you feel seen, where you feel known, you're going to seek that out. And usually the pathway of least resistance for getting that hit of feeling seen something. Or
feeling in control even, I feel like sometimes. I think
so many factors.
That's something I've had conversations with recently with some of the women is like with pornography, we are able to have control exactly of, I'm not going to get rejected in this scenario. I'm getting to choose exactly what type of fantasy or role or whatever I want to play out. I know I get to choose, like, I'm not going to be rejected by a man in this, because in their mind, they're getting to have something specific. And so getting to have that control of taking away a fear of rejection. And it's a counterfeit, obviously, of what intimacy would be. But I think that latches on too.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point. So that's kind of, so that's women's perspective. Generally, again.
Generally. Everyone's different.
No, totally. But for the sake of conversation, what would you say is kind of the side effects? Like once women do get wrapped up and it becomes a compulsive or addictive behavior of either, serial dating or watching pornography or
Right.
combination of whatever that is? What are kind of those side effects that women
Yeah.
begin to experience?
Yeah. Some of I think the bigger things I've heard from the women is it really starts to affect your view of yourself, especially at those teenage ages when most of us were exposed, or even younger nowadays. You're growing up, and in pornography, women are painted in a very specific light a lot of the times. While there is a variety, I think women are painted as these almost like a plastic version of what
Right.
women are supposed to be, a very doctored view of women.
Totally.
They're supposed to look a very specific way. They're supposed to act a very specific way. They are supposed to be exotic or elusive or just fit into this very narrow view of what women are supposed to be like. And that can really start to affect their view of themselves, not only body image, but also their mental space of like, well, how am I supposed to be appealing to men then? Am I just supposed to just be hypersexual? Am I supposed to just fit into this very narrow view? Is that how I'm going to get intimacy or relationships?
Right.
And so I've also heard a lot about how it can affect, having body dysmorphia and really struggling with self-hatred because you're not fitting into a very unrealistic, unreal, highly filtered, even surgically enhanced view
Right.
of what women are supposed to be like. And so, yeah, definitely also buys into that same view of you're here to like please men, you're here to be there for their disposal.
Right.
And that obviously leads into feeling objectified and like women are just objects here to be used.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, it's so sad. And I think a lot of times we take it for granted, especially coming from a Christian perspective. Like, yeah, pornography is bad or sexual sin is bad. But we never really ask the question, why? Why is it actually bad for us besides, well, the Bible says so. I think a faithful answer in that way is right. But also, like if we actually sit and consider. And so those are, right, the societal factors. And but thinking about like, yeah, God has designed sex in a specific way to be two parties that have made a covenant similar to the covenant that he's made with us, right? Willing to sacrifice and serve and lay down your life for the other. And through that covenant, through that safe context of like God's love, that, the Hebrew word for that is hesed, meaning like steadfast, loyal, faithful love. Like no matter Israel's disobedience or rebellion, God is going to choose to be there. And so in the same way, it's the type of context or relationship that our sexuality is meant to be expressed in fully between a man and between a woman as God has designed it. And so pornography and a modern sexual ethic kind of flips all of that on its head to say, oh, sexuality is actually about meeting my needs from a male perspective, and from a woman's perspective, oh, sexuality is about making a man desire me and to meet his needs. And it's so dehumanizing.
Yes,
it's all about, seeking one's pleasure and one's own good at the expense of another.
Yeah.
And for others to watch as well.
Yeah, it's like the performance.
Yeah, so literally the opposite of intimacy.
Yes. Everything that could be the opposite is what it is.
Right.
Yeah. And me and Ben were recently speaking at a university, and a question we got was, how can we use what if pornography is used in a healthy way or in a good way?
What if someone doesn't have any struggles in their life?
And they're just using it for to make their life better.
Right. Yeah.
And it kind of first I was like, man, we just had a huge discussion about all these things, and it almost felt like we really portrayed, those harmful things in the first place.
Yeah.
But it also led me to think well, there's nothing about pornography that is good. There's no way to use pornography in a healthy way. There's no way that it'll never affect you in a negative way for all parties involved, for the viewer, for the people who are in it, for the industry, and then all the underlying too. It is completely against that intimacy that God created for us. And there's no way for it to be beneficial. It's not empowering for women. No. I almost feel like women sometimes act like, well, this is powerful. We get to choose with our own bodies.
Yeah.
And it's what narrative are we playing into here? That we think for women to feel empowered, we have to choose to exploit ourselves in a way that's very degrading still. And so I think that is a view that sometimes they don't take into consideration of what they think that means.
Yeah, kind of want to have your cake and eat it too in a way, but in a much more destructive way.
Yes,
and
definitely.
So that's our perspective, is we want to preserve the Imago Dei, right? We believe that all humans were made in the image of God and have value beyond what we consider. Like, we want people to be treated in the way that God created them to be treated, as beloved children, as his image bearers. And we just find using pornography, being under the effects of pornography use, right? The way that, teens like ourselves, when we were first exposed, are harassed and helpless to this billion-dollar sex industry that we're being, taken advantage of and groomed from a young age in reality, in most cases. And then, for those that are the performers, like you're talking about, how most are a lot of times brought in through some form of sex trafficking or coercion. And that's the sad reality. And so,
and how damaging it is for them
too. Like all parties involved.
When there's like stories of people who've left the life and talking about the type of experiences, for so many times too, these are things that are online that are not consensual. That are being forced. Even if, it seems like it's a performance of some sort, these women, a lot of times, or men, are being forced into this specifically.
Right. No, most definitely. There's so many wide-ranging side effects on how pornography affects men and women, especially, whether it's users or people that are involved in the industry.
Right.
And so, I love, you were at a retreat recently with Dr. Carol. And so I love a phrase that she uses: we can shout into the darkness all we want, but in reality, we need to find a light, even if it is like just a candle, and stoke that light into a flame as much as we can. That's where real change comes from. And so kind of shifting from, seeing the problem, we need to expose it. We need to bring the darkness into light. But I would love to hear, just from your own perspective, like, how did you find hope? How did you find healing? And what does that look like for a woman to step out of some of that shame and these narratives that we've talked about into the light?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a loaded question, because there's always, everyone's story is different. Everyone finds recovery in different ways. But I think there are like some foundational things that are helpful. But for me, what was my biggest aha moment in recovery? Because, as many of us, I think in recovery, when we're in these cycles of shame, we have those moments where we try to get out, and it never ends. But for me, what actually helped me have that aha moment was when I realized I am not my sin, and that is not my identity. I thought growing up, this is who I am. Like, I was not taught growing up that like Christians struggle in sin too. Like, we're always going to live in sin. I thought, oh, you're a Christian, like you snap your fingers, you never have sin again. And that was so damaging to me, because I thought, this is just who I am. I'm never going to get free from this. And so when I was able to label, first of all, that I'm not my sin, and this is not who I am, this is something I struggle with. And then on top of that, to be able to actually label it and say, okay, I am addicted to pornography, and this is a sin struggle, and I am stuck in this. And I think that's a big place for a lot of women to, first of all, have to disconnect it from their identity is really hard. I think for anyone in recovery it is. But then to be able to actually say, I really do have a problem and I really need help. Because if we're in this place of like, I watch pornography, but it's not that bad, or it's not that often, or it doesn't affect me, then we're not actually going to be pursuing recovery if that's our standpoint. And then another thing is to get out of that darkness, because sin thrives in the darkness. Whenever we step into the light, even if it's with one person to start, a safe person. I remember the first time actually going to someone to tell them like, I struggle in pornography. That weight feeling lifted off of like, oh my God, like that feels crazy. Like literally feeling like chains being lifted off of my life, because God did not design us to live in secrecy or darkness, living like we are having a secret life, or that weighs on a person, especially for years of addiction. And so being able to step out of that darkness into the light is a huge place of where that shame can no longer thrive.
Totally.
Because shame cannot survive when it is shared in safe spaces.
Right.
It will be diminished.
Yeah.
And so that leads into what we do
Most
with
definitely.
423.
Yeah. It's a privilege to get to do that type of work and to create those communities. And I think, right, every person has to make that individual decision to do one of two things, right? Either step into reality, like you talked about.
Right.
And what is most true is what God says about us.
Yes.
As followers of Jesus, we've been given his righteousness that he deserved, yet gave to us through the cross whenever we believe in him and commit our lives to following him. And so what becomes most true is our identity is as righteous as Christ.
Yes.
Therefore, we are not our sin anymore. There's andness, as we talked about in the past, right? You can be a follower of Jesus and still struggle on this journey to becoming more like him until we're home with him one day. Or, right, you can commit to reality, like I said, or you can compromise. There's that cognitive dissonance, which you were describing through those narratives, like, oh, it's not that big a deal. Everyone does it, or I don't struggle that much. And so, as someone who follows Jesus or is trying to, that you're not meant to be engaging this behavior.
Right.
But because you do it time and time again, you feel powerless to it. You come to a point of despair, and so many compromise of saying, well, I guess I'll compromise on my beliefs and just bifurcate this part of myself in a way. And so
I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
please.
I think something I think about with that is we talk about, well, at least it's not this in a comparison. Like if you're just struggling with pornography, you're like, well, at least I'm not sleeping around. And then it just continues to escalate. And then if you sleep with people, you're like, well, at least it's not a bunch of people. Or if I compare it to these other things, there's always a comparison of it's not that bad. And that's not how God views our sin. Right? He's not like, well, one time, that's fine. It's not a big deal to him. And also it's not a weight of, sexual sin is way heavier than any other type of sin. But to him, he sees it all as, not honoring to him and not what he designed us to be. So I just wanted to mention that because I think in recovery, a lot of times we do hear excuses or even narratives of our own mind. At least it's not this bad. And then that becomes an excuse. But go ahead.
That's a good point. All sin in essence is missing the mark, missing the way that God has designed us to live.
Right.
And, within recovery, like at the start, some wins look different versus complete sobriety.
Yes, absolutely.
But before you get to that point, making excuses, moving the goalpost, right? Like we said, you can commit to reality or you can continue to compromise.
Yes.
And so for any female listeners out there, I would love, like, what would you say to them if they're still at that point of, do I join a community? Do I jump in? Do I expose myself to a safe person?
Right.
Or if they're struggling with pornography, what would you say to them?
Well, first I would say, you're not alone and that the amount of women that are struggling is the fastest growing statistic, I think, right now of, in that way. And so you're definitely not alone. And on top of that, there is hope and there is freedom for you too. And you're not too dirty or too messed up or whatever narratives that have been painted to you for you to receive help and healing in that way. And so I would say if you're in a place where you have been wrestling over and over again, like many of us do in these cycles of, I want freedom, and you have that in you and you know that, then it's time to commit. And it is time to make a step, even if that feels so scary. But whether that is going to someone safe or joining a community, whatever it might be, working in therapy, there's lots of outlets. But we are here to walk with you along that journey of what that's supposed to be. You're not expected to have it all together. You're not expected to be X amount of days sober or whatever it might be. Wherever that's what I always say for the 423 woman, wherever you are in your journey, we're here to walk with you through that. And so our journeys are not linear. Recovery is not straightforward. And it is a hard thing. You're not going to be able to do that all by yourself with no type of help or no community or no nothing. And so that's what I would say. And that, there are safe spaces for you. And we have one here. So
yeah. No, totally. Yeah. It's never too late. And you cannot do this alone.
Yes.
Yeah. No. Thank you so much, Jara, for offering your perspective, for bringing such wise insights. And we're praying for the people that haven't taken that step yet.
Yes.
That,
amen.
If you feel the conviction of the Holy Spirit, we want to be here. Go and email us. Go to the website.
We're here.
Communities. We want to talk to you. We want
Yes.
to welcome you in.
And we were once you.
Yeah.
We're not above anything. That
I'm still a sinner.
we are all sinners.
I'm a beloved child of God, but I
Amen.
still sin.
That's right.
Yeah,
thank
we
you,
want to
Ben.
walk with you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is a great conversation, and I'm just grateful for, having the space to have these types of conversations that are so needed.
No, of course. It's a privilege. Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about 423 Communities or get connected with us, go to 423communities.org and follow us at the links in the show notes or the description below.